Right, so Keir Starmer, fresh from being criticised for his apparent advocacy for Israel to commit war crimes against the Palestinian people in order to get to Hamas, fresh from his backpedalling on this issue while still ardently supporting the occupying apartheid state, and fresh from getting his own letter from the International Centre of Justice for Palestinians, all covered in other videos already. Do check my recent back catalogue. Well, now a legal blast from Starmer's past has hammered him as well for his tacit support of the Israeli state and every atrocity they're committing against people they've locked up in the biggest concentration camp of modern times that goes by the name of the Gaza Strip. And their intervention once more shines a light on Starmer fundamentally having pretended to be somebody else to get to where he is today. An organisation that has actually barred him from ever rejoining them unless he changes his way away from the Red Tory Tony Blair Tribute Act he has become, the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers. And they've scorched him on his latest pathetic political positioning on what still looks to be a potential genocide of the Palestinian people. Right, so once upon a time, back when Keir Starmer was still pretending to be a socialist, he was a member of the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers, because there is such a thing. Those lefty lawyers Suella Braverman likes to make a song and dance about, well, there legitimately are some, though these are the real ones and not the made-up ones that live rent-free in her head. Actually, not all members need to be lawyers, incidentally. The important part is the socialist bit. Haldane have existed since the 1930s as a legal and campaigning organisation independent of political parties, so not affiliated to anybody in particular in that regard. And they act as basically a forum to promote discussion and analysis of law and the legal system, both here in the UK and internationally, from a socialist point of view. And they've got quite a history of discussing human rights and civil liberties and racism and social justice. So them having their say on what is happening in the Middle East right now isn't a huge surprise, but they gave their former member the treatment whilst they did so too. Starmer wasn't just a former member of the Haldane Society of Socialist Lawyers, you see. He was once their secretary. But that all came to an end when, and I'm not sure you'll have heard this, it doesn't get discussed much, it's not particularly newsworthy, it would seem, and Starmer very much keeps this to himself, but he left Haldane when he got appointed to Director of Public Prosecutions at the Crown Prosecution Service in 2008, because apparently being in charge of the CPS and being a socialist are incompatible. Make of that what you will. Alarm bells should have rung about his supposed socialist credentials way back then, I suppose. I've covered his record at the CPS in numerous other videos. I won't go into that again. We know Starmer is no socialist, though. Just look at the purging going on in his party, even to this day, where now voicing support for Palestine might see you get suspended or expelled, because he's effectively banned free speech from within his party. Coming nationwide, should he become Prime Minister, no doubt, so look out if you don't vote Labour. But back in 2021, the Haldane Society, clearly unable to expel Starmer for having turned out to be the lying red Tory toad he had become, far too late for that, he'd left in 2008, they still felt it relevant at their annual general meeting of that year in 2021 to pass a resolution banning Starmer from ever being able to rejoin them unless a vote be passed to overturn the resolution. They condemned him for his policy positions, notably his egging on of Boris Johnson to reopen schools faster during the pandemic, his clamp down on free speech, his disregard for migrant rights, his anti-trade unionism, his inaction on anti-black and anti-Muslim racism, still ongoing today, of course, despite the since published Ford report pointing it out to him, and his inaction over transgender abuse, and a whole lot more besides. I can't imagine Starmer, incidentally, being in a hurry to rejoin them. He played his socialist con trick card, and that genie isn't going back into the bottle now, but again, Haldane have spoken out against Starmer as part of a wider statement condemning the atrocities happening in Gaza at this moment in time. It's quite lengthy. I'd happily advocate going to haldane.org and reading the whole thing. It's currently on their main homepage. But it begins with, "We recognise that the Israeli state is perpetrating a system of apartheid throughout historic Palestine, including in the occupied Palestinian territories, the OPT, in accordance with the racist ideology of Zionism. Along with the International Court of Justice and most jurists, we recognise the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. We recognise that Palestinians have a legally and morally unimpeachable right to resist Zionist colonialism, occupation and ethnic cleansing. This brutalisation is endorsed by so-called rule of law states that are funding the increased militarisation of Israel and the occupation. This has created an untenable situation of extreme and daily violence and conflict. We recognise that the fundamental cause of violence throughout the historic Palestine is Israel's settler colonial project and the Zionist ideology that animates it. No punches pulled. You very much get where they're coming from here, and you can see why Starmer's support for Zionism, without qualification, makes him an unsuitable future member again as well. The Society statement goes into detail on condemning Israeli atrocity, pointing out the plight of Palestinians and the human rights abuses that they endure. They touch on the failures of the international community to hold Israel to account, and particularly condemns the UK for the ongoing arms exports from here to Israel, and criminalising protesters who target those arms factories, knowing what they are building there are likely to be used against Palestine. They reserved the tail end of their statement for Keir Starmer, though, singling him out above any other politician, and you might argue that they did that because they have their own beef with him. But there's no denying his statements on this current Israel-Palestine calamity have been decidedly one-sided. On Starmer, Haldane have said, Sir Keir Starmer is the leader of the Labour Party in the UK and a former human rights lawyer. When asked on national radio whether cutting electricity and food were contrary to international law, Sir Keir said, Israel has a right to defend herself. It is an ongoing hostage situation and responsibility lies in one place, that is with Hamas. This amounts to an endorsement of collective punishment, war crimes and ongoing occupation. UN Rapporteur on the OPT Francesca Albanese commented that it is extremely concerning that a senior politician expresses support for the commission of war crime and potentially a crime against humanity, such as intentional starvation of civilians when part of a widespread or systematic attack on a civilian population. We expressly condemn Sir Keir's uncritical endorsement of Israeli war crimes as deeply irresponsible and as undermining international law. We also note the broader parallels in the usage of the word terrorism labelled to legitimise the brutalisation of Muslim people globally through the so-called war on terror, which has seen states, including the UK, engage in murder and displacement of millions. We call on Sir Keir to withdraw his remarks, which are incompatible with his duties as a lawyer, a politician, and as a human being. As socialists and as lawyers, the Haldane Society supports peaceful negotiation and stands in unflinching solidarity with the people of Palestine in their justified struggle to liberate themselves from Israeli colonialism and apartheid. It isn't merely that the Israeli government should withdraw from Gaza, but that Israel's apartheid regime and the Zionist ideology that animates it should be dismantled entirely. We will be making a donation in solidarity to medical aid for Palestinians. That's a hammering, a deserved one, and yet one more message sent to Starmer that the general public, legal bodies, organisations, many of his own members, will not put up with the position he's taken on this. It's causing Labour a lot of damage, being on the wrong side of the argument, as they yet again are, with this absolute charlatan leading them. Because let's face it, when is Keir Starmer ever on the right side of an argument? Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Do leave a comment and have your say on this story as well. Be part of the conversation. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation proving the Haldane Society's point, where Starmer's Labour have now effectively censored any mention of Israeli apartheid, presumably because the exalted leader just doesn't like it. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.